All right, guys, I want to do a deeper dive on oak nuts, understanding where we're gaining deer size at, how we're gaining deer size, different ways, basically how these deer put on weight. Now, I had started off with the other video that's going to lay the foundation for the rest of these. I'm focusing on the grain side of things for white-tailed deer. Most of the time when you're thinking of food plots, you're thinking of greenery, right? Well, there's the other factor of greenery, and that is the grain side of the deer's diet. So I'm going to focus on white oaks because they tend to be a little bit more nutritious than some of the reds and maybe even the chestnut oaks. And then, of course, you got the chestnut tree, which is also in a classification of its own as far as nutrition. So we're going to discuss ways to make sure we're adding the proper weight to a deer in order to get these guys to the next step. So let's talk about how we're managing these deer to grow to bigger sizes. For those of you that just kind of gotten into this, this video should hopefully be very helpful to you, but maybe you're, the advanced guys, this may not be too concerning. But what we're focused on is protein. Just think of yourself as a bodybuilder. Those guys digest ridiculous amounts of protein to build muscle. Deer, it's the same concept. We want to stack protein in here in order to build muscle mass. And of course, with deer, though, the extra antler size is a byproduct of all the protein we're pumping into a buck. So greens will provide outrageous amounts of protein. That's why in the summertime, it's vital that they start eating greenery and not grains in most cases. Not all grains are below satisfactory levels. So we're going to start with nature's most common grain as far as wooded habitat. And that would be these guys right here. Carpets and carpets of oak nuts. All right. Some of these are pretty slick and hard to get a hold of. But you can see I obviously am providing extremely large amounts of oak nuts in here. So we need to understand something here, if I can hold on to these guys. What type of nutrition does this type of grain have for deer? Well, first off, the protein level is awful. So right off the bat, we are not building muscle mass when bucks need it the most. If you think about the rut, testosterone levels are rising. When testosterone rises, muscles develop faster, they get larger, and it adds additional weight to a deer. So even if, let's say like a yearling buck, when his first time happens, when his testosterone takes off, he goes through a second physical change in his body structure. His muscles start bulking up for his age bracket. That's the first time in his life where he suddenly has a more mass development in that part of the body. So the neck swells, the face looks thicker, the head looks thicker, the front shoulders look thicker, the hips are a little bit thicker, but they're behind what the front shoulders look like. In some cases, it can be the other way around because deer have different body types. But this type of grain is not supporting muscle mass. Now, yes, you can get trace minerals out of these, like you can any acorn in the woods. They are at various levels depending on what your ground offers. But protein is usually 6% or less in these type of nuts. And with my poor soil, I'm willing to bet that might be less. Say maybe 4 or 5% protein. That type of grain is not what I want. There's many levels of grains nutrition-wise. However, when deer eat these, they are still putting on weight. So in theory, you can claim that you are bulking up a buck. You are correct. When they eat these acorns, the bucks get larger, they look thicker, you know, their ribs may disappear, everything looks nice and healthy, but you're adding fat. It is not muscle. These acorns do an excellent job of adding fat. They give the deer energy, because when the deer are using energy, it is the fat reserves in their body that gives them energy. That's what the body feeds off of, and that's what these acorns supply. Now, I know this is, you know, as far as developing deer muscle, this acorn is not helping me out, but the benefit that we're getting here is a couple of small things. Oak nuts have various levels of tannin, and when you have different levels of tannin, that increases the taste or decreases the taste depending on tannin levels. The higher the tannin, the worse it gets. But tannin also has a little bit of a small property to help deer digest proteins better. So you're giving it just like a little bit of a boost, even though it may be 1, 2, or 3% boost, that's still a boost. So there is some small benefit to eating these acorns, but there are many other grains available that are far more superior than what nuts have. And for most of us, we can't afford to service that large of a grain in order to keep these deer from eating these. These are done by necessity because deer have to. I mean, there's nothing else in here that I'm providing grain-wise that's going to keep these deer from eating them. I had, you know, a small amount of Milo over here. It's gone. They've already stripped it. Done. That grain is much more beneficial than oak nuts. So grains in general will boost energy. That's their main goal. And they also add weight, but it's not muscle weight. It's usually fat weight. Now, that's not an unhealthy deer by any means, because you're protecting the muscles. What happens when deer runs out of fat? The body starts devouring the muscle, which means that deer is going to quickly decline in health, strength, and endurance. The odds that that buck will survive the winter goes way down. So these acorns will help protect what muscle mass that we have been putting on through these greens. And of course, with rising testosterone levels, guess what? We have more muscle mass to deal with in these bucks. So we still need protein. Now I'm using my area as the example, but even though the antler hardening has done come and gone, they've already stripped their velvet off, you still have to focus on the muscle development. So your food plots are still going to be able to provide that at this stage, but the deer's appetite has changed to grains. Now, I want to get into why I'm not planting corn. Now, like I said in the other video, if you plant corn, that's fine, but I have a little bit different mission when it comes to my grain selections. I did have corn out here. I don't no more. Corn is roughly the same level as these guys when it comes to nutrition. And dang, there's still acorns falling out of these trees like crazy. So corn roughly is 5 to 6% protein and roughly about the same amount of trace minerals, depending on what your soil can provide. So why would I want to add another grain that is not supporting both fat building and muscle building? To me, it's a waste of time. Now, yes, acorns are very skittish from year to year. This year, I have an extremely high bumper crop because the frost didn't kill the flowers. If frost ends up killing these flowers, then I'm in a whole different classification of no grain available anywhere on this ridge. And that means I need to have grains available in my food plots in order for these deer to put on the additional fat reserves and muscle building ability. So to me, this is where the secret is in helping a buck develop even further, and that is picking grains that are better. So used to, right, like I said, I planted corn. I thought I was doing a good job. You're drawing deer in, they're eating it. But the only difference is corn doesn't have tannin in it, and it tastes better than oat nuts. That's why deer can scarf down corn, because it's the next step above what is available to them. But even in some instances, corn can't stop deer from eating acorns. So we have to enlist other plants to assist muscle building and fat building. You want to give them both if you can, and that's why I pick Milo. It has a 22% protein level, anywhere from 16% protein or higher has been known to build trophy deer. So I don't want to hang around the minimum. I want to exceed the minimum. So these minimums is, I'm not guaranteeing myself that I'm getting the best genetic return out of my deer. If I push them beyond the minimum, I'm going to really see what we have here. Oh, I hear another acorn falling. Better step away from these trees or I'll get popped. So what is another grain that can build fat besides Milo? Well, that would be, in my opinion, soybean is the ultimate grain as far as what it provides bucks when they need it, and they will devour that once they find it. You're giving bucks, depending on your soil now, you're providing up to as much as 38 to maybe 40% protein. That's incredible muscle mass building. These guys need that in combination with fat reserves for the rut. So if you're just relying on oak trees, you're going to build a deer, but it's not going to be the build you're actually looking for. To give you the best example, let's take two different deer on two different diets. If I grow a deer that weighs 200 pounds on a high protein diet, not necessarily no grain in his diet, just pure protein, and I take a buck that is of the same weight and put him on a grain diet. So both these bucks weigh 200 pounds. Which one of them is going to give you more meat? Pause the video right now if you need to. I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is the buck that eats the greens. Why? They weigh the same. There's no difference. Yes, there is. That weight that you put on is pure muscle. Now, granted, that deer's not going to be healthy enough to survive the winter because you reduced his fat reserves to only whatever he could build through the greenery, which is not that much. But a deer that weighs 200 pounds under a grain diet might have up to 18 to 20 pounds of fat in its body reserves. So in all reality, there might be 180 pounds of muscle. That's the difference. Even though these deer weigh the same, it's the diet that got them to that point. So if I take that same 200-pound deer that's on the greens and I don't give him the grains that he needs during the rut to protect his muscle mass, you move your hunting to the end of the season, ask yourself that same question again. Which buck is going to provide you more weight? The buck on the greens or the buck on the grain? The answer will be the buck on the grain, because that deer has had fat reserves that it can burn to give it energy. So those deer that are constantly on a green diet that are not able to build good fat reserves will lose energy much quicker, and then they will start losing critical muscle mass because their body is being forced to eat it if they are working in overdrive by consuming less than what they need. That's why you're giving your deer this cushion in order to protect its body during the hardest times of the year on that buck's life. So yes, acorns are basically like a necessary evil to me, because you need fat reserves, and I don't have enough grains to counteract what this ridge is producing right now. You take this whole ridge into consideration, I would have a stack of grains that would be freaking ridiculous. And I can't match that right now with my property size and my food plot limits. So these guys is what I try to boost in order to give these bucks as much of a fat reserve cushion as I can to help counteract the rut. Also, on your grain levels, it's to me the greatest thing you could ever do is research grains. That could be your missing link to helping your deer move to the next step. Because if you get a buck that's eating a diet of grains that is high protein and fat building, your recovery time for those deer after the rut is going to be so much better. And that's where the hidden size comes in. So just be prepared for that. Acorns provide something deer need, and that is fat reserves. Even though when I talk about muscle development, this is what helps build it. So by doing both, I'm able to give it fat and muscle building. But I would rather have higher quality grain than this. Because if you look at your management system, it's like a bell curve. So if you start your bell curve, this is inferior bucks. You move up, and wherever the crest is, that is your average looking deer for your property. And as you decline, you're getting to the exceptional deer. Those numbers will dive down and go this way. I'm trying to keep this side of the bell curve up. How do I raise that? And that's helping assist with better grain quality than what these acorns are providing. So I hope a video like this helps you want to, plant better grains for your deer. Anybody that's putting Milo in there to help deer, you are doing already a fantastic job. If you're a corn planter, there is hope for you. There is a newer corn that some of these companies have developed, and I didn't want to leave this out in the dark. So corn is not necessarily going to be just a bad boy to me. There is something I think they call a neutral grain corn or some super corn that they've developed. The protein level is like anywhere from 8 to 11, maybe 12%. I'd have to go back and look at it again. There is a company called Real World that has developed this, and I'm sure there's others that's already done this by now. But the corn nutrition level is way higher than the standard field corn or feed corn that you set out for deer. Now, my opinion is corn can be hard on your soil. It can rob it of nitrogen. So you better put some nitrogen fixers with that corn to try to balance out what corn can cancel out. And it also can rob your soil of trace minerals, because all that nutrition has to get into the corn ear itself. And when the plant decays, there's not that much left in the stalks. So just be aware of that. But if you wanted to switch to that newer super corn that they are advertising, you are at least moving your bucks up the ladder on the muscle building side of their bodies, which they desperately need that during the rut. You want these deer to look bulky, you want them to look strong, and at the same time have good fat reserves. All right, guys, I hope this video helps you, and there will be more on this to come. I'm also going to attack the management side of that. I kind of hinted on it on the bell curve a bit when it comes to culling deer. So you all have a great day.